Hi everyone, this is Blue and in this video I'll be attempting the Wings of Fire Hybrid Challenge. This is the first time I've ever done a video like this using my voice, so I apologize if I sound awkward, but hopefully it'll be fine. But without further ado, let's get into the video. For our first hybrid, we have a Seawing Mudwing, which I find to be a pretty interesting combo. I don't really see this one being done much, and in general, I feel like Mudwing hybrids are pretty uncommon. I'm guessing this is because a lot of people might find it trickier to make brown work well with other colors, but in my opinion, it's a really nice and natural looking color, so I'm glad I got this combination. So, I decided the characters' names after designing them, but for the purposes of this video, I'll be talking about their names and story first. This is probably a really common name for Mudwing OCs, but I ended up going with Slate for this one. Slate is a confident and playful dragon. Having grown up mostly in the Sea Kingdom, he'd always get a few stares every now and then from passing Seawing dragonettes, but due to his strength, very few actually mess with them. One day his parents decided to send him to Jade Mountain Academy with the idea that his outgoing nature as a hybrid would probably be better received in a place where it didn't matter what tribe he belonged to. After graduating, Slate ended up becoming a member of a rescue squad that patrolled the east side of Pyria. His strength and swimming skills make him a valuable asset to the team, as he's able to quickly clear obstacles and rescue drowning dragons. When I was first brainstorming the design, the first thing that came to mind was beach sand, but given that sandwings exist, that didn't really fit. Then I was thinking, what if mud was like underwater? Even though it's partially made of water, so it would just become more diluted mud, right? I imagined the mud settling on the ocean floor and hardening into rock, which is how I got the idea for Slate's rocky-looking scales and its name. Slate is a metamorphic rock that's formed when clay, volcanic ash, and shale, which is also known as mudstone, undergo heat and pressure generated by shifting tectonic plates. It has a high heat capacity, so if I were to give our boy a power, it would definitely be fireproof scales. Slate is usually a dark grayish color, but in the deep sea it would look blue, which is totally not just my excuse for making his back scales look blue like a Seawing's. I like how I made the scales look like broken, jagged pieces of rock because it reflects Slate's brittleness. The light brown of the underbelly represents the shallow clay near the surface, and the dark brown is the clay that has settled at the seafloor but hasn't yet had time to transform. The base colors I chose are overall a bit muted, which I think really suits the underwater look that I wanted him to have. For the second hybrid, I spun an Icewing Hivewing. This felt even weirder to do because I had almost no idea how I would name or even design this guy. But, ironically, I think this one ended up actually being my favorite of the three. You wouldn't believe how long it took me to name this dragon, which makes it worse because the name I eventually decided on was so simple. After looking at many different bug images, I gave up because only a few matched his colors, and of those, all of their names were either too scientific and long, or too weird sounding to work, or had a scientific name that was a reference to a demon and also happened to be the name of a Hasman Hotel character, while the common name contained the name of a canon Seawing character from Wings of Fire the book series. I'm looking at you, Stolas Imperialis, also known as the Imperial Tortoise Beetle. So yeah, I gave up for a bit and thought more about his lore, and then I just named him Coldtail because that sounds enough like a bug name, right? It has tail at the end, you know, like the name these guys have. Anyways, Coldtail is a dragon who tends to be somewhat introverted, being one of the only members of his kind at the time. He grew up amongst the Hivewings in Pantala, and would always feel a little annoyed and insecure when others stopped to look at him. He didn't always know whether it was out of interest or disgust, but he didn't really care because it felt awkward either way. While not every Hivewing had venom, those that did carried a painful, paralyzing toxin. However, Coldtail's venom was the opposite of painful, and when injected, induced a soothing and cool feeling. At first he thought this was useless, but as more of his peers got to know him, the more he was told that his venom would actually be very useful for medical purposes, and he eventually became a doctor. Being reserved and calm in nature, He demonstrates great control when handling patients. His stinger allows him to administer his sedative venom with careful precision, while his weak ice breath allows him to cool down larger areas of the body to relieve inflammation. When designing Coldtail, I wanted to combine the spiky mane that Icewings have with the plated armor look that some bugs tend to have. Like most Hivewings, he has 2 extra horns, with one being at the end of his snout and the other being further back on his head instead of at the bridge of his snout. I don't know why, but I added extra claws to his wings as well, and it looked good, so I ended up actually keeping them. I kept the Icewing tail, but made it look dark like a Hivewing's, which fits his lore pretty well in my opinion. When I was coloring Coldtail, I first started with the typical light blue of Icewing scales and the yellow color of Hivewing scales. I tried adding orange, but I didn't quite like it, so instead I opted for darker blue and black, which ended up making him look like some kind of exotic insect. Overall, I think this one turned out pretty well. For our final hybrid, I had to create a Nightwing Leafing character. I had a feeling that this one would be pretty easy to do because I already had a design in mind after just a few seconds of brainstorming. Nevertheless, I like how it turned out, and I can see why Nightwings are one of the most popular choices for hybrid OCs. Black just goes well with everything. I decided to name this character Deepstrider. Deepstrider is a friendly but mysterious dragon who is occasionally spotted wandering around the forest. Possessing both Leaf Speak and Nightwing telepathy, he is used to hearing voices all around him and doesn't mind noisy environments, although when he was a dragonette, his powers tended to overwhelm him. Nowadays, Deepstrider has strong control over his powers, but tends to keep his mind open to the thoughts surrounding him. He is probably one of the most knowledgeable dragons about the local fauna, given how much time he spends in the deepest, darkest parts of the forest, where most dragons tend to avoid. Being half Nightwing, his night vision allows him to journey where most Leafwings don't. Like most other Leafwings, he can draw energy from the sun, but also feels energized in the moonlight as well, making him much more active than most dragons. His strong medicinal knowledge causes some dragons to seek him out if they are desperate, but luckily he resurfaces every now and then to bring back a cartload of exotic herbs and fruits that he sells while traveling around. Deepstrider also has an interesting way of describing his powers. When asked to do so, he describes every living thing as having an aura around them. These auras carry signs that most dragons can't detect, but those with Leaf Speak or Mind Reading can interpret and even interact with them by extending their own aura. Despite being constantly full of energy, Deepstrider has a surprisingly calm demeanor and speaks somewhat softly. Even when faced with danger, he carries a jovial attitude and is always quick on his feet. I wanted to show Deepstrider's wings spread out behind him, as well as the leaf-like fins on his limbs, so I drew him standing up. When you can see him clearly, Deepstrider appears to have very dark green-blue scales, with bits of brighter green scattered throughout. This makes him look like the dark backdrop of the forest, where light occasionally shines through between the leaves of the canopy. When he wraps his wings around himself and curls his tail in, he can make himself look like a leafy plant, which I can definitely imagine him doing as a way to jump scare other dragons. The edges of his wings are bright green, and the silvery Nightwing scales on the undersides make the outermost parts of his wings seem like they're sparkling in the sun, while the darker inner parts look like dust and droplets of water floating through the forest air. And that's it for this video. I had a lot of fun designing these guys, and I might do this challenge again at some point. I've never really done a video like this before, so this took me a lot of time to put together. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like this in the future, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and let me know if you have any suggestions for future videos down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching.